A man died fighting for his community. His heart was buried, or so they thought. What no one knew was that the very billionaire he fought against now lives because of that same heart. The morning fog rolled across Millbrook Valley like a shroud, settling over the weathered brick walls of the Patterson Community Center. Inside, 43-year-old Rebecca Chin stood at the podium, her voice cracking as she addressed the packed auditorium. 3 weeks had passed since the accident that claimed her husband David, and the weight of his absence pressed against her chest like a stone. David believed this place was sacred, she whispered, gesturing toward the faded photographs lining the walls. Decades of birthday parties, wedding receptions, and graduation celebrations. 37 years this center has stood. 37 years of memories, of hope, of community. The crowd of 200 residents nodded solemnly. They'd gathered not just to mourn David Chin, but to prepare for war. Sterling Development Corporation, led by the notorious Playboy billionaire Harrison Blake, had filed permits to demolish their beloved community center. In its place would rise another soulless luxury apartment complex, pricing out families who'd called Millbrook home for generations. Rebecca's 12-year-old son Tommy sat in the front row, his dark eyes reflecting the same determination that had driven his father. David Chin had been everything Harrison Blake was not. Humble, selfless, devoted to something greater than himself. As the community's elected chairman, David had spent countless evenings drafting petitions, organizing protests, and rallying neighbors who'd grown tired of fighting the inevitable. The irony was crushing. While Rebecca stood here grieving, David's heart, his generous, passionate heart, was beating strong and steady inside the chest of the very man who sought to destroy everything David had died protecting. 200 miles away in Manhattan, Harrison Blake adjusted his custom Italian tie and stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. At 35, he commanded an empire worth $3.7 billion, yet something felt different since the surgery 6 months ago. The heart transplant had saved his life after years of cocaine abuse, and reckless living had nearly destroyed him. But the doctors hadn't warned him about the strange dreams, the sudden urges to visit quiet neighborhoods instead of exclusive nightclubs. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Blake, the Millbrook Project meeting is in 10 minutes. Harrison nodded absently, his fingers unconsciously tracing the surgical scar beneath his shirt. The donor had been anonymous as always, but sometimes he wondered about the person whose sacrifice had given him this second chance. The old Harrison would have popped another pill and headed to the nearest strip club. This version found himself reading philosophy books and staring at family photos on his employees' desks with inexplicable longing. "Sir?" his assistant pressed. "Send them in," Harrison replied, though his mind was elsewhere, pulled toward something he couldn't yet name. Rebecca rolled up her sleeves and hefted another bag of cement mix. The autumn sun beat down mercilessly as she directed a crew of volunteers rebuilding the community center's crumbling foundation. Without David's steady leadership, she'd been forced to step into the spotlight, organizing work crews, filing legal appeals, and somehow keeping hope alive when everything seemed hopeless. "Mrs. Chin, we're running low on rebar," called out Janet Morrison, a retired nurse who'd become Rebecca's right-hand woman. "I'll handle it," Rebecca replied, wiping sweat from her brow. They'd raised $12,000 through bake sales and car washes, but it wasn't nearly enough to compete with Sterling Development's bottomless pockets. She was bent over a set of blueprints when a shadow fell across the page. Looking up, she found herself staring at a tall, lean man with calloused hands and work boots caked in mud. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with sandy brown hair and surprisingly intelligent green eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am. I heard you folks might need some extra hands." Rebecca straightened, studying this stranger with suspicion. "And you are?" "Jake Miller," he replied smoothly. Harrison had practiced the alias for weeks, complete with a fabricated background as an unemployed construction worker. I'm between jobs and this seemed like a worthy cause. She handed him a shovel. Can you dig? For the next 8 hours, Harrison Blake, billionaire real estate mogul, mixed cement, hauled bricks, and learned what honest sweat felt like. His manicured hands blistered within an hour. His designer jeans, hastily purchased from a thrift store, were soon caked with mud and mortar. But something about the physical labor, the shared purpose, the simple dignity of building something instead of tearing it down, awakened a part of him he'd forgotten existed. Rebecca worked beside him, directing the crew with natural authority. She moved with purpose, her commands clear and confident, her dedication infectious. When she paused to help elderly Mr. Patterson with his section of wall, Harrison noticed the gentle way she guided his trembling hands, the patience in her voice. "You're not from around here," she observed during their lunch break, handing him a bologna sandwich and a thermos of coffee. "Does it matter?" he asked, accepting the simple meal with genuine gratitude. Back in Manhattan, his usual lunch cost more than these volunteers earned in a day. "Everyone has a story," Rebecca said. "What's yours, Jake Miller?" Harrison's throat tightened. If only she knew. Sometimes a man just needs to be part of something bigger than himself. Rebecca studied his face, searching for deception. Instead, she found something that surprised her: sincerity. This stranger's eyes held a depth she hadn't expected, a hunger for meaning that reminded her painfully of David. As weeks passed, Jake became indispensable. He possessed an uncanny knowledge of construction techniques, could read blueprints like poetry, and somehow always knew exactly what materials they needed. Anonymous deliveries began arriving: premium lumber, professional-grade tools, industrial cement mixers that should have been far beyond their budget. "How'd you arrange this?" Rebecca asked one evening, running her hand along a delivery of steel beams that must have cost $15,000. Harrison shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I know a guy." But Rebecca was nobody's fool. She'd noticed his perfect teeth, the expensive watch he'd forgotten to remove, and the way he instinctively reached for his left hip where a phone should be, the unconscious habits of wealth. Yet every day he showed up, worked harder than men half his age, and never complained about the back-breaking labor. More troubling were the moments when she caught herself watching him, admiring the concentration on his face as he welded support beams, the gentle way he showed Tommy how to measure and cut lumber. Her son had barely spoken since David's death, but somehow this mysterious stranger had coaxed smiles and laughter from the boy. "Mom, Jake says he'll teach me to drive the bulldozer next week," Tommy announced over dinner. "We don't have a bulldozer, sweetheart." Tommy grinned. "We will." The bulldozer arrived Tuesday morning, along with a full crew of professional contractors who claimed they were volunteering their time. Rebecca cornered Harrison behind the supply trailer, her eyes blazing with suspicion. "Who are you really?" Harrison's hands were steady as he continued mixing mortar, but his heart, David's heart, was racing. "I told you. Jake Miller." Jake Miller doesn't have access to $500,000 in construction equipment. Jake Miller doesn't redesign load-bearing structures with the precision of a civil engineer. And Jake Miller sure as hell doesn't command a crew of union workers who call him, "sir," when they think I'm not listening. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo mixed with honest sweat and sawdust. "So I'll ask again, who are you?" The moment stretched between them, electric with tension and unspoken truths. Harrison felt an overwhelming urge to confess everything. His real name, his connection to Sterling Development, the strange dreams where he saw flashes of a life that wasn't his own. Instead, he reached out and gently brushed a streak of dirt from her cheek. "I'm someone who believes in what you're building here." Rebecca should have pulled away. Should have demanded answers, threatened to call the police, done anything except lean into that touch. But David's death had left her so desperately alone, and this man's eyes held a kindness she hadn't felt in months. "That's not an answer," she whispered, but her voice had lost its edge. "It's the only answer I can give you right now." Their work continued, but something fundamental had shifted. Harrison found excuses to work beside her, to catch her elbow when she stumbled, to share coffee during the pre-dawn hours when they arrived early to beat the heat. Rebecca told herself it was practical. He was clearly the most skilled worker they had. But late at night, alone in the bed she'd shared with David, she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when Jake smiled at her across the construction site. The community center was taking shape, rising from the rubble like a phoenix. The new structure would be even more beautiful than the original, with soaring windows, accessible ramps, and a community kitchen capable of feeding 300 people. Harrison had quietly rerouted funds from Sterling Development's budget, telling his board the money was for community relations. In truth, every dollar spent here felt like penance for a lifetime of destroying places just like this. "Jake, can you stay late tonight?" Rebecca asked on a Thursday evening in November. "I want to review the electrical plans." They worked by lamplight, blueprints spread across sawhorses, their heads bent close together. Rebecca pointed to a section near the main hall. "David always said this room had the best acoustics. He used to joke that he could whisper, 'I love you' on this side and I'd hear it clear across." Her voice broke. Harrison's hand covered hers before he could think. "He sounds like he was a good man." "The best," she whispered. "He saw potential where others saw problems. Hope where others saw obstacles." She looked up, meeting Harrison's eyes. "Like you do." The space between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Harrison leaned closer, drawn by something deeper than desire, a recognition that transcended logic. Rebecca's lips parted slightly, her breath catching as his fingers traced her jawline. Then her phone buzzed against the workbench, vibrating loudly enough to shatter the moment. Rebecca jerked back, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment and guilt. "I should go," she stammered, gathering her papers with shaking hands. "Tommy will be wondering where I am." Harrison watched her flee into the darkness, his heart, David's heart, aching with longing and regret. He'd almost kissed the widow of the man whose sacrifice had saved him, and she'd almost let him. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen next. The twists are just getting started, and trust me, you won't see what's coming. Rebecca arrived at the construction site early Friday morning to find Harrison's phone lying in the dirt beside the cement mixer. The screen was cracked but still functional, and when she picked it up to return it, a text message appeared that made her blood run cold. "Mr. Blake, the board is growing impatient about the Millbrook delay. When can we proceed with demolition? Blake. Harrison Blake." Rebecca's hands trembled as she scrolled through the message history, each revelation hitting her like a physical blow. Requests for progress reports on the community center project. Expense approvals for undercover surveillance. Financial transfers labeled infiltration costs. The man she trusted, the man she'd almost kissed, was working for Sterling Development. She was still staring at the phone in horror when footsteps approached behind her. "Rebecca, you're here early." Harrison stopped short when he saw his phone in her hands, watched the blood drain from her face as the truth settled between them like a blade. "You son of a bitch." The words were quiet, deadly. Harrison had weathered boardroom battles and hostile takeovers, but nothing had prepared him for the devastation in Rebecca's eyes. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been spying on us this whole time. How you've been pretending to care while feeding information back to your corporate masters." Her voice rose with each word. How you made my son believe in you while planning to destroy his father's dream? It wasn't like that, Harrison said desperately. Yes, I work for Sterling Development, but I'm not. Get out. Rebecca's voice was ice. Get out before I call the police. Rebecca, please. Just listen to me for 5 minutes. I said get out. Her scream echoed across the construction site, bringing volunteers running from every direction. Janet Morrison arrived first, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. Rebecca, honey, what's wrong? Jake Miller here isn't who he claims to be, Rebecca announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the site. He works for Sterling Development. He's been spying on us, sabotaging us from within. The reaction was explosive. Angry voices rose from every direction. Someone threw a hammer that clattered against the trailer where Harrison stood. Mr. Patterson, 78 years old and usually gentle as a lamb, stepped forward with clenched fists. You lying piece of garbage. We trusted you. Harrison backed toward his truck, hands raised peacefully. I know how this looks, but it's not what you think. I'm trying to help you. Help us. Rebecca laughed bitterly. By pretending to be one of us while planning our destruction? Do you have any idea what this place means to us? What my husband died trying to protect? At the mention of David, something shifted in Harrison's chest. A sharp, sudden pain that felt like his heart was being torn in half. He pressed his hand to his sternum, gasping. Your husband, he whispered, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. David Shin. He was the donor. Rebecca's anger faltered. What are you talking about? Harrison's face had gone pale, his breathing shallow. The heart transplant. 6 months ago. The donor was, oh God, it was David. The construction site fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Rebecca stared at this man, this stranger, this enemy, as the impossible truth settled over her like a suffocating blanket. No, she whispered. That's not, you can't. I have the medical records, Harrison said quietly. March 15th. David Chin, aged 45. Motorcycle accident on Route 27. His heart, his liver, his kidneys, they saved 4 lives that day. Mine was one of them. Rebecca's knees buckled. Janet caught her before she could fall, but her eyes never left Harrison's face, searching for any sign of deception. You're lying. I wish I was. Harrison pulled out his wallet with shaking hands, withdrew a folded piece of paper. The letter from the Oregon Bank. They don't give names, but they told me he was a community leader. A father. A man who died fighting for something he believed in. Rebecca snatched the paper, read it with growing horror. The dates matched. The circumstances matched. The description of the donor, everything matched. David's heart, she whispered. It's beating inside you. Harrison nodded, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. Every beat belongs to him. Every breath I take is borrowed time from a better man. The crowd had grown restless during this exchange, sensing secrets they didn't understand. Tommy pushed through the adults, stopping short when he saw his mother's stricken face. Mom? What's happening? Rebecca looked at her son, then at Harrison, then at the construction site where they'd worked side by side for months. The betrayal cut deep, but this new revelation, that her husband's sacrifice had saved the life of their enemy, felt like the cruelest joke the universe had ever played. Everyone go home, she said quietly. Project suspended. The Sterling Development Board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Harrison sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, studying the faces of 12 men and women who'd made fortunes destroying places like Millbrook Valley. These people had been his partners, his allies, his friends for over a decade. Today they would become his enemies. The Millbrook project has been delayed long enough, announced board chairman Richard Sterling, Harrison's own godfather and the man who'd built the company from nothing. The community center is nearly rebuilt, the residents are organized, and our window for easy demolition is closing. I'm authorizing immediate action. What kind of action? Harrison asked carefully. We've hired Burke and Associates to handle the removal, Sterling replied, referring to a demolition company known for intimidation tactics and questionable methods. They'll arrive Wednesday morning with full legal authority to clear the site. Any residents who interfere will be arrested for trespassing. Harrison's heart, David's heart, began to race. That's not necessary, Richard. I have a better proposal. The room fell silent. Harrison had never challenged the board openly, content to collect his dividends and fund his playboy lifestyle. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned the value of honest work and genuine community. Instead of demolishing the Millbrook Community Center, I propose we purchase it and donate it back to the residents. Then we invest $20 million in affordable housing development around the site, creating a model community that generates positive publicity instead of lawsuits. Richard Sterling's face turned purple. $20 million? For a bunch of welfare cases and bleeding hearts. Those welfare cases include teachers, nurses, mechanics, and small business owners, Harrison replied calmly. They're the backbone of America, and we've spent 40 years pricing them out of decent neighborhoods. This is our chance to be part of the solution instead of the problem. Board member Patricia Wells leaned forward. Harrison, have you lost your mind? We're in the business of making money, not running charities. We'll make money. Just not by destroying communities. Harrison activated the wall-mounted display, revealing detailed financial projections he'd spent all weekend preparing. Affordable housing is the fastest-growing market segment in America. We can charge reasonable rents, maintain steady occupancy, and build our reputation as a company that cares about more than quarterly profits. The debate raged for 3 hours. Harrison faced down childhood friends who accused him of betraying his class, business partners who questioned his sanity, and board members who threatened to remove him as CEO. But David's heart beat steadily in his chest, giving him strength he'd never known he possessed. In the end, it came down to a vote. 6 members voted with Richard Sterling to proceed with demolition. 6 members voted with Harrison to pursue the affordable housing development. As CEO and majority shareholder, Harrison cast the deciding vote. Project Millbrook is officially redesigned as a community development initiative, he announced. Construction begins next month. Richard Sterling stood slowly, his face a mask of disappointment and rage. You've just destroyed everything your father and I built together. I hope that community center was worth losing your birthright. Harrison met his godfather's glare without flinching. It was worth everything. Meanwhile, Rebecca stood in her kitchen, staring at the phone as it rang for the 15th time. Harrison had been calling constantly since their confrontation 3 days ago, leaving voicemails she refused to listen to. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, picking at his cereal while shooting worried glances at his mother. Maybe you should talk to him, Mom? There's nothing to talk about, Tommy. He lied to us. Used us. But he also saved our community center. Without Jake, without him, we never would have finished the construction. Rebecca wanted to argue, but she couldn't deny the truth. The new community center was beautiful, functional, and built to last centuries. The anonymous donations, the expert craftsmanship, the professional contractors. It had all come from Harrison's guilty conscience. The doorbell rang. Rebecca ignored it, but Tommy jumped up to peek through the window. Mom, it's him. And he's got flowers. Rebecca's resolve wavered. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights trying to reconcile her anger with the impossible truth that David's heart beat inside the man she'd begun to care for. The betrayal stung, but the connection between them had been real. She'd felt it in every shared glance, every accidental touch, every moment when they worked together toward a common goal. "Tell him to go away." Tommy remained at the window. "He's not leaving. He's just sitting on our front steps like he's planning to wait all day." Hours passed. Rebecca tried to focus on household chores, on paying bills, on anything except the man camped outside her door. But every time she glanced out the window, he was there, patient, determined, and somehow familiar in a way that made her heart ache. Finally, as sunset painted the sky purple and gold, she opened the door. Harrison looked up from where he sat on her porch steps, his expensive suit wrinkled and his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "I quit Sterling Development today," he said without preamble. "Walked away from $3 billion and told the board to go to hell." Rebecca remained in the doorway, arms crossed defensively. "Why should I care?" "Because I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the lies I told you. Because your husband's heart beats in my chest and I can't ignore what that means anymore. Because I love you, Rebecca, and I love Tommy, and I want to be the man David would want me to be." The words hung in the evening air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Rebecca felt her walls crumbling, her anger dissolving into something far more dangerous. "You destroyed my trust." "I know. You made me doubt everything I felt." "I know. You broke my son's heart when he found out you weren't who you claimed to be." Harrison stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Let me spend the rest of my life earning it back. All of it, your trust, your love, Tommy's respect. I'll work construction for real this time. I'll live in Millbrook, be part of the community, prove that the man you fell in love with wasn't completely fake." Rebecca stepped onto the porch, close enough to touch him. "The man I fell in love with was kind, humble, and dedicated to something bigger than himself. Can Harrison Blake be those things? With David's heart to guide me, I can try." She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of her husband's sacrifice. "He was the best man I ever knew. If his heart chose you, maybe there's hope for us yet." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, flavored with salt from tears neither had realized they were crying. When they broke apart, Tommy stood in the doorway, grinning despite himself. "Does this mean Jake's staying for dinner?" Harrison knelt to the boy's level. "My real name is Harrison. I know I lied, and I know you have every right to hate me for that. But I want you to know that everything I felt for you and your mom was real. The work we did together, the pride I felt watching you grow, that was all true." Tommy studied his face solemnly. "Will you still teach me to drive the bulldozer?" Harrison laughed, the sound rich with relief and joy. "I'll teach you to drive anything you want, kiddo. We've got a whole community to build together." 6 months later, the Millbrook Community Development Project was featured on the cover of Urban Planning magazine. The revitalized neighborhood included affordable housing, small business incubators, a state-of-the-art community center, and a memorial garden dedicated to David Chen's memory. Harrison Blake, former billionaire playboy, now worked as Millbrook's Community Development Coordinator, earning $45,000 a year and loving every minute of it. He and Rebecca were married in the community center's main hall, surrounded by the neighbors who'd once wanted to lynch him and now considered him family. During the ceremony, Harrison placed his hand over his heart, David's heart, and made a silent promise to the man whose sacrifice had made this new life possible. He would love Rebecca with the depth David had shown her. He would raise Tommy with the wisdom David had begun to teach him. He would spend every beat of this borrowed heart making the world a little better, a little kinder, a little more like the place David had envisioned. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Rebecca whispered in his ear, "David would be proud of the man you've become." Harrison held her closer, feeling the steady rhythm of the heart that had brought them together. "I hope to spend the rest of our lives proving you right." The story of Millbrook became a model for community development across the nation. But for Harrison and Rebecca Blake, it was simply home, a place where love had conquered corporate greed, where second chances were possible, and where one man's sacrifice had created two families' happiness. Sometimes the most powerful changes happen one heartbeat at a time. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what you thought of Harrison and Rebecca's journey. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought was your enemy was actually fighting for the same things you believed in? Share your stories below. We love hearing from our community, and your experiences might inspire our next video.